Okay, so welcome everyone to Under the Sun's first ever videocast. And we are delighted to be hosting this discussion today between the Azrieli Palace Community's short story discussion group in Ra'anana, Israel, led by Mrs. Lenore Hahn, who happens to be my mother, a former teacher of literature, with author Wendy Fontaine in Los Angeles, very early in the morning. Thank you so much for getting up at 6:30 a.m. Earlier to have yourself looking so presentable. About her essay, Leaves in the Fall, which was published this past May in Under the Sun. A little bit about Wendy for benefit of everyone here and everyone listening on this videocast. Wendy is a writer, teacher, and mother whose nonfiction has appeared in dozens of magazines, newspapers, and literary journals, including Literary Mama, Passages North, River Teeth, Mud Season Review, Hippocampus, Long Ridge Review, Pithead Chapel, Sweet Lit, Our Own Under the Sun, as well as Creative Nonfiction's Sunday Short Reads. Her fiction has appeared in Angel's Flight Literary West, and she's won prizes from Tiferet Journal, Hunger Mountain Review, and Identity Theory, and has been nominated for Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net anthologies, and that's very impressive. Her current projects include a memoir, a novel, and a TV screenplay. She also teaches writing workshops and on the intersection between the neuroscience of memory and the crafting of memoir at conferences and studios across the United States. So, good afternoon, readers at Ra'anana, and good morning and welcome to you, Wendy, in Los Angeles. I am, as I said before, so thrilled to have everyone here together today. And without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Lenore. Go ahead, Lenore.
Okay, this is very exciting to have our monthly short story discussion being videotaped and getting the opportunity to meet the author. This is something very special for us. I would like to ask my readers a few questions about the story, and I'm going to start. Can anyone here tell me, why did Wendy and Matt's marriage fail? Why did it end? Can anyone tell me why?
Why did they think?
What do you think? Why did the marriage fail?
They drifted apart.
Pardon me?
They drifted apart.
Okay, but there's another answer.
Because their husband had an affair with another woman
Because they drifted
and
apart.
left her.
Hold on,
Okay.
Wendy, if you can't hear, let me know, because I've got a microphone, and just let me.
Yes, I can hear.
Okay,
I can
great.
hear. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, would you repeat that, Srul?
Her husband had an affair with another woman and left her.
That's right. Her husband left her to live with a woman and her family. So, and he not only left her, but he left their child. And how old was their child, Angie, when this happened? Angie, when this happened?
No, two.
She was 2 years old, right? And Wendy and Angie moved out of their house, and where did they move to?
When she grew up.
Her hometown.
Pardon me?
Her hometown.
Her hometown in Maine, exactly. And before this all happened, before Wendy became a mom, what was her career? What did she do for a living?
She was a journalist.
She was a journalist, exactly. Before moving to her hometown in Maine, what did she send to Matt before she left? She sent something to him before she left. Does anybody remember what that was? She was trying to protect herself, and what did she send him? Anybody remember what that was?
Kind of a
Pardon me?
It was a legal document.
A contract, right, a legal
she was trying to
document.
protect herself.
Pardon me?
She was trying to protect herself.
She was trying to protect herself, and what did the contract say? It gave her permission to take her daughter to Maine, and also,
To stay in their apartment, I think. To stay in their house.
no, she didn't stay in their house, no. Also, she asked for $700 a month from their joint bank account because she had to provide for herself and for her daughter. Okay. All the time that Wendy was there, what does she keep hoping? What does she hope? Yes, Tippy?
He will come back.
She was expecting her husband to come back to her.
Come back for her and for the baby.
Yes, to come back, yes. And he'd come back so that they could go home again. And her parents still lived in Maine, but they were really not able to help her very much because they themselves didn't have much and they lived in a trailer. Okay.
They work very hard. They work every day.
Yes. Okay. And all during this time, what does Wendy keep remembering? She keeps remembering things. What keeps going through her mind? Does anybody remember that?
Perhaps that they were happy together.
All the times they were happy together, exactly.
About the first night, the first time that they got married.
Yes, about the time that they got married and how happy they were together, exactly. And when finally she became pregnant with Angie, how did she react to her pregnancy?
She was extremely happy.
She was very happy.
But they
She,
especially waited 8 years.
in fact, as a writer, she even wrote letters to her baby.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And what were the first words that she said to Angie when she was born? And this was very important, as we saw later on in the story.
I'm going to take care of you.
I'm going to take care of you. Exactly, which is exactly what she did.
I want to interrupt. I see, Wendy, that still makes you very emotional.
Yeah, you guys are making me cry.
Okay. And
Sorry.
at the,
I
At
have
this-
a question. Is this story fact or fiction?
this is
Is it
fact.
fact or fiction?
This is fact.
It's a genre that we call creative nonfiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a personal
And-
story?
Yes.
Yes.
She's crying.
Okay, during this time, what contact did Angie have with her father?
They spoke on the telephone regularly.
Pardon me?
They spoke on the telephone regularly.
Yeah, they spoke on the telephone. Okay.
And the times he took her home to those,
Yeah.
his girlfriend or whatever, and 3 children.
Yes, and he eventually came and he took her for visits. And how did Wendy react to this, to the visits that her daughter made to her father and his live-in girlfriend? How did she react?
Well, her daughter said the lady was very beautiful.
Yes, the daughter said that the girlfriend was very pretty, and of course she was very upset to hear that.
Didn't the
Which-
girlfriend have children?
Yes, the girlfriend had children as well. Right. And, okay. But how was Wendy doing psychologically during this period of the time? How would you describe, how was she psychologically?
Well, he's depressed.
She was depressed, exactly. And she cried a lot. She missed her husband. But finally,
But she had the courage to go on.
she had the courage to go on. Yes.
Luckily.
And what does she suddenly realize about their relationship? She realizes something about the relationship between her and her husband. What had happened to this?
They love themselves.
Pardon me?
They had allowed themselves to grow apart.
They had allowed themselves.
Which is what you said
grow
at first.
apart.
Well, that's what happened. That's why he went to another woman.
Right.
Yeah, they grew apart,
They
exactly.
no longer went out together or have some time to themselves.
Right,
There was
Right.
No longer any closeness.
right. They just didn't do things together.
They said they were too busy.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah. And she was busy with her daughter, and he was busy in the arms of another woman. Okay.
Where did he have the energy?
Where did he have the energy? He was a young man.
Man always has the energy.
Okay. Finally, there was a divorce. And how did the divorce proceedings go?
He never pitched up.
He never even showed up. He gave in to everything. She got custody, full custody of the child. She got alimony.
He got the house.
Huh?
He got the house.
He got the house.
She got some money.
Pardon me? She didn't want the house anyway. Right. Was she happy with the settlement?
No, she wanted him back anyway.
Why don't you ask her?
We'll get to that.
Wait, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to
Happy
that.
with the settlement?
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that, Saul. Hold on.
Okay. In a way, it's interesting. She felt sorry for him because all he was missing in bringing up this little girl. And eventually, she came to realize that the divorce was necessary. Why? Why did she realize it was necessary?
But he broke up with that other woman.
So that she could make a new start.
Well, she realizes something about her husband or her ex-husband.
And he's not really a dependable.
He's not very dependable. He's not the man that she had married. He's not the man that she had married.
That she could not trust him anymore.
Right. In other words, they no longer had anything in common. He was not the same person. And what else does she realize? That I'm going to tell you, because I think it's beautiful how it's written. She said her world and Angie's world would never be the same, but it would be something else, a new kind of beautiful. And I think that was so beautifully written. I have to say that.
That's life. Life always brings something new. My question, thanks God. You know?
Right.
We always have to hope.
Right, exactly. And which means that that Wendy really was turning a corner and looking forward to starting her new life. I hope I'm right.
You're right.
Okay. Wendy, I wanted to ask you some of my own questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
When you were writing this, was it cathartic for you to write this story? In other words, was it cathartic?
Well, first of all, let me say how much fun it was to be sort of in the room while you guys were talking about this story. That was a real gift, so thank you. And I wish I had a reading group like yours, because it sounds fantastic. Was it cathartic to write this story? I think the answer is no. It was painful, and it was difficult, and it took me several years, to be honest. Especially to get to some of those the deeper truths of, this person isn't the person that I need any longer. Those took a long time to get there. So one thing about writing, maybe some of you know, is it's not cathartic until it's done. And then when you go back and read what you wrote, then it's cathartic. And
Uh-huh.
as you said, I got a little teary there when you were talking about Angie, because I can look back and feel that now, now that the writing is done.
How long after the divorce did you write the story?
I probably so the divorce was finalized in 2009, 2010. It took quite a long time. I started writing it a couple of years later, but I really wasn't ready to be writing it. Like I was writing raw emotion. I wasn't writing with any sort of hindsight until probably 6 or 7 years later, when I could really step back away from the person I was then to the person I was now and see it with a different perspective.
Angie,
That's
Wendy, I'm sorry. I
That's
was
okay.
surprised that during this time, you were not angry, you were not resentful, you didn't look for revenge, which I think a lot of women in your situation would have done.
Can you comment on that?
That's a question I get a lot. Why wasn't I angry? I think part of me was angry, but more of me was hurt
Uh-huh.
and
Right.
sad. Yeah, and I grew up in a family with a dad where he was the angry one. We weren't allowed to have anger.
Uh-huh.
So anger was not a familiar choice for me. So I think it was more like sadness and sorrow, and that really just bumped out any anger I would have been able to have.
Did you ever feel you wanted to get back at him? You wanted revenge?
Maybe, but I didn't really know I didn't know what would revenge look like, because I was just in the day-to-day survival mode.
Uh-huh.
I didn't really have the advantage of thinking, what would my revenge look like? And at one point I told myself, I'm going to get through this. And on the other side, I'm going to be the person that I know I want to be. I don't want to turn into something ugly and revengeful. I'm going to come out of this the person I want to be. And so I think I did. And I'm glad with that choice.
Uh-huh. Right. If this were to happen today, do you think you would react the same way?
Knowing what I know now, no. I think looking back, there were times when I say to myself, Wendy, you should have really done this or that. But in the end, it worked out fine. So.
Right. How is your daughter?
My daughter is amazing. She's 16 now. She's funny, she's smart, she's very athletic. She's a good friend. She's amazing.
Does she have any contact with her father?
I knew you'd ask that. I would call it sporadic, phone calls, text messages a few times a year. Not much. But she's okay with that, because that's what's normal to her.
Uh-huh.
Are you remarried?
I'm remarried.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this year is our 10th anniversary.
Oh, that's nice. That's great.
Do you have other children?
No, I never wanted another child. Angie is my everything. And so it's just the three of us. And he doesn't have he didn't have children of his own. He doesn't now, except for Angie. And he's a fantastic father.
That's great. You
Yeah.
deserve it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. And Angie deserves it. So I think Angie doesn't miss Matt, because anything she wants from a father, she gets from James, my husband.
And he was never part of her everyday life.
No, not really. No.
So he's not someone that she has expectations from.
That's exactly right. Yep. She doesn't really know how it ought to be, because it never was that way in the first place. So she's got to, when she wants to talk to him, she sends him a text, and then they end up talking, and she thinks he's funny. She thinks he's funny and a great guy to talk to when they talk. And so I'm happy with that.
Wendy, I have a friend who recently lost her husband, and she read your story. And she said she got very emotional because she was able to feel what you felt, even though she didn't lose her husband in the same way as you did, but it was a loss, and she could so identify with your story.
Oh, well, I hope, I'm glad she found something, maybe it was comforting to see somebody, because it very much did feel like grief and it felt like a death.
No, she just identified with
Yeah.
what you felt.
Yeah. And I think that's why we read this genre of nonfiction, is because we want to see some connection between the writer and ourselves. So I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, good.
Can I ask?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
You know, I was particularly struck at the point in the story when you found yourself in laughter. You're laughing for the first time. I thought that was so remarkable. You had spent so many years being depressed and sad and down, and then suddenly you found yourself laughing with friends and coworkers, and you realized obviously you had crossed a certain threshold to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was some hard-earned laughter. And I think when you look in retrospect and you see how far you've come through something that was difficult, you feel a sense of pride in yourself and of lightness. And I knew that I had friends around me and they wanted me to be happy. So we found our ways. We always find our ways to be happy, I think, even in the darkest times.
Crossed a certain point. It was really a sign of growth that you were able to laugh and find new friends.
Right. And that job that I did not want and that apartment that I did not want became places that I really enjoyed them. And when I think back on them now, I think, wow, what a beautiful time that was. It was just Angie and I together, and life was slow.
You had friends, you had a social environment.
Can you comment on the imagery of the leaves in the fall?
Oh, I was going to
You
ask
can
that
ask that
question.
as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Maine, where the seasons are very pronounced. You definitely know when it's fall. You definitely know when it's winter. That's kind of like how you track the movement of time, is seasons and months. And so here in Los Angeles, we don't have that so much. So that's something I certainly miss. So that imagery, it occurred to me one day, that leaves are very brittle. And the ecology of how they die on the branch, but first they become very brilliantly colored and beautiful, and they come back next year. They're never really gone, they're never really out. I just thought that was really beautiful, and I wanted to grab onto that.
I also thought that the leaves were changing color just as your life was changing. It could never be the same.
Right.
And I thought of that image, that
Yeah.
leaves were changing, they were changing. And
Yeah. Right. And I've never been one who likes change. I find it kind of unnerving, but also at the same time, we're always changing. Everything is always changing. And, you notice that when you're a parent, as soon as you get used to one stage of your child's life, they change it. You got to get used to that next one. She's about to be a senior in high school, and I'm adjusting to some changes. So, yeah, I'm with you on that.
Did your writing of creative nonfiction take off at this point? Was this your first story that you wrote of creative nonfiction, as opposed to doing journalistic writing?
No, so I was a journalist for about 12 years, and then I went to graduate school to study creative nonfiction, which is a different kind of thing altogether. It's not so factual and research based, and you kind of play with your memories. So I have written, it was a difficult transition to go from one to the next, but no, I've written so many stories I don't even know, I couldn't even count them. So many.
This was not the first.
This was not the first, no, maybe one of the No. So when I was going through this divorce with Angie, I started writing a newspaper column called Party of Two about just being a single mom. And so that sort of bridged the gap from journalistic writing to personal writing. So those were the first things I wrote, moving into creative nonfiction, and that sort of eased me into writing more personal essays like this one.
And when did fiction and the other genres come into your
Yeah,
life?
fiction came much later. When I was a journalist, when I was a reporter, I thought of an idea for a novel, and I wrote it on a napkin, and I kept it for 10 years. And then I don't know how I managed to hang on to it. I'm so disorganized. But then one day I thought, well, what if I wrote this? And so I just started writing it as a novel. And it's done. It's a mystery. I'm trying to find an agent, which is another story altogether. And then my husband and I decided to write, well, he started it, and then I said, well, I could maybe be helpful. So we wrote a screenplay together for an episodic TV show.
Where's that now?
Did it become commercial?
Well, my husband's in the movie business, so he talks to his producer friends, and we're trying to get it somewhere, but that's a process also.
Wow. So what are you working on currently, other than those two projects?
I've got some more of these short essays in the works. I like to write them. Since the pandemic, I have a very short attention span for longer writing, but I'm getting there. It's getting longer. And I'm very focused on Angie right now because I know this is her last year before going to college. So she's definitely my project right now, my number one. So, but just as things pop up, I start writing them. And right now, lots of my writing is about, the beginning of saying goodbye to this child who's been absolutely my everything. So that's a process.
Yeah.
What brought you to move to the other side of the country? A very different climate.
Yeah, I moved when Angie was 4. So we were in that apartment for about 2 years. And I had reconnected with my husband because we went to high school together. So we were kind of having I would call it somewhat of a long distance relationship. And then I got into a graduate school and I got a full scholarship. So I just said, let's go. This is an opportunity to change your life, and changing your life is what you wanted to do. So let's go. And since I did have full custody and I did have full parental rights, I could go. So we did. And we've been here ever since.
Wendy, do you have like a routine of getting up in the morning and from such and such hour, between such and such hours you sit down and write, or is it less structured?
Yeah, no, I wish I had that. So I don't have that. Lots of my friends do, but I don't. I'm a grab it where you can grab it kind of person. So lots of times when Angie was little, she would be at art class and I would be in the hallway writing. Or, I just get it where I can. And I'm kind of a mad scientist writer. Like I just go crazy on one piece of writing and then I stop for a couple weeks and then I go crazy. But I don't have that regular routine, but I really wish I did. I don't know that I'll ever be that way, but.
And do you find yourself writing about very diverse topics, or are you driven to similar type of topics?
I would say similar. Lots of it has to do with my daughter. Yeah, because she's the center of my world, for better and for worse. I have a lot of attachment issues. I write about attachment issues. But sometimes I just wrote, she has a vision issue and she wears prescription swim goggles. She's a competitive swimmer. So I did a lot of research about the history of swim goggles and just weaved it with our personal narrative of trying to find her goggles so she could compete in this sport that she loves so much and the challenges of that. So that was a little bit different. So yeah, I don't veer too far away when I'm writing personal essay. That is, my novel is a murder mystery and I've never killed anyone. So that's a variation.
Do you always have a pad or a notebook with you so that wherever you are, if you get an idea, you jot it down?
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah, I do. If you could see my desk right now, you'd see a million little notes, like, little tiny ideas, and I write it. I have notebooks, yes, but sometimes I'm writing an idea on a grocery store receipt or napkin, right? Or the notes app on your phone. Sometimes I just, I'm out for a walk and I think of something, so I just record it in real quick and then I forget I made a note. So I make another note later. Yeah, they're all over the place.
Are there certain artists or writers that have motivated you or been your models along the way?
For sure. So I love Joan Didion. I think most people do. You've probably read Joan Didion. I love Bernard Cooper. And I was fortunate enough to take a number of classes with him here in Los Angeles at his house, which is pretty amazing. I'm a nature girl, so I read a lot of Mary Oliver over and over. Yeah, I love just almost everything I get my hands on. My bookshelf is, you can probably see my bookshelf behind me. That's one of 7 bookshelves that I have in the house. So we are voracious readers, my daughter and I both.
But did Nat get remarried?
Not that I know of, but it's possible. Anything's possible. He does have 2 children, 2 children since the divorce. I don't think that the mother and he are together, but I really don't, I don't talk to him. I don't know. So Angie talks to him, but I don't. I just don't want to.
I'm fascinated by what you teach in your writing workshops about the intersection between the neuroscience of memory and the crafting of memoir. So can you just talk about that a bit?
Sure. When I was in graduate school studying creative nonfiction, I started to think about, all the ways your memories can be wrong. So, I have my memories about how the divorce happened and what led up to it, but I'm sure, Angie's father has a different memory about it, different perspective. And I also noticed there were because of the trauma of what I was going through, I had big black spots in my memory. Like I could not remember things like when it was really fresh. If I tried to think back, there were just blank spots, and I thought that was really peculiar. So I started doing some research about how memories are made and how they're saved and how they're recalled. And I read this book called The 7 Sins of Memory by Daniel Schachter, who's a Harvard neuroscientist and professor and chair of the department. And I just saw a lot of parallels between the writing of a memory and the way memories can go wrong. And I found that there's a lot of truth to be had in the ways that you are remembering incorrectly. Like, why are you remembering that incorrectly? Or why did your memory focus on this instead of that? And so I just started researching it. And then I realized that this could actually be a writing tool for people who are struggling with their memories, like I was. And so then I started doing workshops and classes about how to go about the activity of writing using some of these mistakes of your memory. And we all have mistakes of memory. It's not a human flaw. It's just how things go in our brains. So I found it fascinating, and I thought maybe we could actually use this to our advantage.
Can you give us one example?
Sure. So my daughter does this a lot. There's a so-called sin of memory called misattribution, where you take 2 things that are not related and you stick them together. So she always has this memory of fishing with her father, and she's wearing this pink fishing vest that she used to have when she was little. But what she's never actually went fishing with her father. She used to go fishing with my father. And her grandmother on the other side of the family, bought her that vest. So when she sticks the 2 things together, she's convinced that she had this experience when she actually didn't. So that to me seems very meaningful. The fishing with her father is an experience I'm sure she would have liked to have had. So what does that mean, emotionally? And if she were to write that, how could she write that? So that's an example.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I find that very often my children speak about something that happened in our family, and I remember it completely differently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my interpretation or my memory of it is completely different than theirs.
Yes.
That's like you girls would say, Friday night, you always remember, what did Mom make?
Bagels and
Bagels and lox.
And you say,
I said, I never had bagels and lox, maybe once in a while, but every Friday night. I mean, I was working, it's true, and it was, by Friday I was exhausted. I was working, I
Yeah.
was going to school. So, you know, bagels and lox were easy supper, but I never remember having it every night. And if you ask my daughter Jerry, that's
Every
what
Friday.
every Friday night, that's what we had.
A lot of times memory, the thing about memory is it's very, we have certain memories and choose certain memories and sometimes remember not as things were factually to protect our egos. That's very big, and yeah, sometimes, and of course it's colored by our brains and our personalities, because a lot of times, talking about that kind of thing that my mother said, siblings could also remember things similarly or differently than each other. One can remember certain things, Naomi remembers certain things that I don't remember at all, and vice versa, although she has the better memory. And so memory is a really fascinating topic, especially with...
what about Madam X?
Oh, yeah, we're not getting into that right now. No, but it's fascinating, and it's so useful as a writer to be able to tap into that.
Yeah, so you know, I have a brother, excuse me, and my brother would have very different memories of our growing up than I have, because, you know, to me, my father was very controlling and very difficult to live with. But he, you know, is a boy and he got away with more, and he had a different relationship with my father. So I think our memories are very, very different. So when I write some things, it upsets certain people in my family, my brother included, because they don't remember it that way. And that's not to say it didn't happen that way. It's just it didn't happen that way for you, and you have your perspective, and your memory is very different than mine, no less true.
Right. What other teaching do you do?
At the moment, I'm not doing any teaching. I taught at Pepperdine University for a number of years. I was teaching journalism. So students brand new to journalism, which was very fun to be in the classroom with them. I stopped because my husband went out of town to shoot a movie, to shoot 2 movies at the same time, and he was gone for 16 months. So you know, somebody's got to bring Angie to all the places she needs to go, and it just became a little cumbersome. So I paused it, but now it's been a few years, so I can see now it was more than a pause. But I'll probably go back to that because I do miss teaching in the classroom.
How did you manage was it an MFA that you did? Masters of Fine Arts?
I did, yes. I did a low residency MFA. So that's, you don't go to class every day. You go in concentrated blocks in the summer and in December. So you have 2 weeks on campus in June and December. And then the rest of it is sort of like an independent study. So you can fit that into your life, you know, as a professor or as a parent or as whatever you have going on. Rather than put your life into your studies, you can put your studies into your life. And that was much more manageable for me.
And for that, did you have to do a creative thesis?
I did. And I think it was about 45 pages. It was on the neuroscience of memory. And from that was born the workshops and the classes that I teach about that. And also some essays. I got invited to write an essay about the neuroscience of memory and how you can use it to write your memoir for an anthology by Hippocampus Books. And so that's included in there. It's a book on the craft. So the craft and aspects of writing creative nonfiction.
Just so everyone understands the genre, you want to define it for everyone?
I can try. So creative nonfiction is nonfiction that has a little bit of creativity and craft in it. It's not straight up nonfiction like a research book or a biography. It sort of picks and chooses certain aspects of your life to tell a very specific story.
Right, so it uses elements of fiction in it, like dialogue and setting, and uses elements that you would find in fiction. It almost sounds like fiction oftentimes, but it's based on
Okay, so Leaves in the Fall is creative nonfiction. You can see that it uses scene and setting and dialogue, and it moves for a very limited. So it's not my whole life story. I didn't tell you about growing up in the trailer. My parents worked in shoe factories. Like, I don't tell you all of that. I just tell you a very specific slice that's pertinent to the story I'm telling at the moment.
Right, so it's not autobiography. Yeah. Any more questions before we
No,
close
just a
up?
comment. I would say that Leaves in the Fall were creative nonfiction.
It is.
That's how I felt about it.
It is.
Yes, for sure. And I should also tell you that I wrote a memoir about going through this divorce. It's also called Leaves in the Fall. And because it's a memoir, it's longer. It's about a specific period of time, but it does explain a lot of the things. Like somebody asked about why wasn't I angry? That's a question I get all the time. So I do explain a little bit to you why this person, this narrator, was not really allowed to be angry. So when she found herself in a circumstance where anger would be a normal emotion, that was not present for her. So it can explain it a little more because it's a longer memoir. So this, I guess you could say it's an excerpt of that memoir.
Right, and memoir is part of the genre of creative
Yeah,
nonfiction.
5:30.
Thank you very much, Wendy. We
Thank
really,
you.
really enjoyed
Good luck,
it.
good luck to Angie also.
Yes. and
Thank you. Thank you for including me in your discussion. You guys have a great book group here.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed having you.
Yes.
So on behalf of Under the Sun and Palace Rananas, Lenore Hahn's short story discussion group, we really thank you, and we hope to see you again. And good luck with all your writing and your life with Angie and your husband.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And happy reading to you.